One of the most common misconceptions that I see in the fashion industry, especially among newer brands, is that they think a tech pack and a spec sheet are the same thing. So today I want to walk through the similarities and the differences so that by the end of this video, you can decide if a tech pack or a spec sheet is right for you and your brand. A spec sheet is taking all of the most important pieces of your tech pack and condensing them all onto a single page. It's a good overview document that you can use to talk to collaborators, people who are helping you with marketing, reaching out to a factory or a supplier for the first time, and basically just giving a good overview of what the general garment is going to look like and what it's going to take to create it. Because the spec sheet isn't as detailed as a tech pack, it's not going to include every single thing that's inside of a tech pack. So it will have a technical sketch on it, and sometimes it will either have like some arrows with a measurement guide. It might have a few little detail callouts, but it's not going to have specific construction information like stitch types, specific construction like hem types and those types of things. It's going to have like general silhouette information like a set-in sleeve or a raglan sleeve or something like that. Then it will have a very brief fabric and trim overview, and this is what a supplier would use to kind of give a ballpark figure of what costing might be or if they have those fabrics or trims available. And then it will also include a color overview, but it's not going to have colored sketches on it like you would see inside of a tech pack. You'll also see on a spec sheet, it will still have all of the same heading information that is on a tech pack. So things like style number, the season, what the garment is, maybe the size run. And then sometimes it'll have some other information, such as a set of basic like overarching measurements, and this is going to give a good idea for costing about how much yardage it's going to take, but it won't have specific measurements for every single point of measure on the garment. And then it's also not going to include any graded measurements for different sizes within your size run. So while a spec sheet is much easier and quicker to create than a tech pack would be, it's not great for detail. It's not great for giving like an accurate overview of the garment. It's really just something that you would use in the beginning to kind of give an idea, maybe get your ideas down on paper. One of my biggest concerns for people who decide to use spec sheets is that it can be extremely confusing to look at because everything is all on one page. Even if it's well organized, it can be very overwhelming to look at all of that information all at one time. And typically, someone who is collaborating with you, working with you, whatever it may be, they don't necessarily need all of the information that you're including on that single page. That's why a tech pack is great for having all of the different elements on different pages so that those people who are focusing on measurements, for example, can focus on just the measurements. Those people who are working with fabric can focus specifically on the fabric. And so I find it very confusing to look at a spec sheet. Using a spec sheet is not a replacement for a tech pack. It is simply a tool that you can use if you want to get your information out faster, you want to reach out to factories a little bit faster, or if you just don't want to send an entire tech pack to somebody like a factory that you're not quite sure if you're going to be working with. Kind of using it as just like a tidbit or a sample of what your full tech pack is going to look like so that you can decide if you even want to partner with those people in the first place. But again, it is not a replacement for a tech pack. The spec sheet is typically used for initial costing and reaching out to partners such as suppliers and factories as sort of like an initial, do I even want to work with you? Is this even a garment you can create? Versus having to send them an entire tech pack or waiting until you have the entire tech pack complete before you can start working on those partnerships and working with finding who would be a good person to collaborate on that garment with you. So it can be a great tool for initial costing and initial sourcing, and it can also give you a good idea for timelines and kind of like what your cost investment is going to be. So the big question is, do you actually need a spec sheet, and is it worth the additional effort over just creating a tech pack? And I will personally say, no, I don't think that you need a spec sheet. I don't think it's necessarily worth the additional effort or time that you would put into creating basically a separate document and then making sure that, you're getting rid of that once you start your tech pack process and you're only updating your tech pack. I think it just makes the whole process a little bit more confusing. And in my personal experience of over 10 years in the fashion industry, I have never seen anybody use a spec sheet for creating a garment, developing a garment, costing, or sourcing. I've always just seen it done with the tech pack. So I think that a spec sheet can really be like a fodder for inaccuracy and sort of an excuse to not put the effort and time into actually creating a tech pack. But on the other side of that, I will say that if you are talking to multiple factories, you're just getting into learning more about sourcing and figuring out what suppliers you can work with. I think it can be a really good option for, okay, I can just send them this one sheet. Hey, this is just like my initial draft. I just want to know if you can even help me create something like that, so that you're not wasting time and so that you can get that process of figuring out who your partners are going to be done a little bit faster and kind of jumpstart it while you're working on finishing up your entire tech pack. The tech pack, which can also be called a technical package or a spec pack, is a collection of technical callouts, measurements, drawings, fabrics, trims, all of the information that your factory and suppliers would need in order to develop your garment. I like to always refer to it as like the blueprint for your garment, just like you would have a blueprint for creating a building. Your tech pack is kind of that for creating your garment. So it's going to have all of the information in it that is needed in order to develop that garment and create that garment. And if you've been on my channel before, you probably are very familiar with what a tech pack is, but I just kind of want to go over the basics so that we can compare it to a spec pack. In contrast to the spec sheet, a tech pack is going to have all of that detailed information. So it's going to have a cover page with clean technical sketches, no arrows, no measurements, no technical callouts on top of them, just completely clean. And this is really important so that your factory can have a clean sketch to refer to and not one that has arrows all over it, especially when it comes to construction and silhouette. And then it will also have any sort of construction callouts that includes things like hems, finishes. It will have different stitch and seam callouts. And then you'll have a bill of materials, which will have all of the materials, including trims, things like buttons, zippers, that kind of thing, thread, packaging, and that kind of stuff. Then you'll have a graded set of measurements, which will show all of the measurements, detailed measurements. So usually for, like a t-shirt or something, it'd be like 20 measurements. So it can be anything more basically than 20 measurements. And that will be graded across your size set. So if you have like small, medium, large, you'll have it for all three of those sizes for all 20 measurements. And then you'll have the colorways, which again is on the spec sheet, but it's not colored sketches. So especially if you're doing things like color blocking or if your trims are a different color, the colorway page is really important for that in the tech pack because it's going to show those specific colors in addition to the color codes. So usually that's Pantone color codes. Then in addition, your tech pack is also used for reviewing your samples and reviewing your garments. So that prototype review page along with photos will be inside of there. And then sometimes, depending on the garment and depending kind of what part of the process you're at, you'll also potentially have things like artwork, which would be artwork for like logos, or if there's actually going to be a design on the garment, and then packaging and sometimes pricing, but usually pricing is kept separately from the tech pack. The tech pack is used for the general development of your garment. So it's going to be a part of almost every single step in the development process, including costing, sourcing, which means contacting the factory and suppliers, sampling and review. So that's reviewing those samples and giving review comments to your factory to request new samples. The general production of your actual garment, so when it's on the production line and you're having multiple things made and then sent to you for retail. And then after the whole production process, it's also used in quality control, so maintaining the life of the product. And depending on the type of company that you're in, you may also use it for pitching the garment to upper management to be adopted into the line. You might also use it for stockists or buyers or that kind of thing after the production process is done. So why do you need a tech pack? Like I said, the tech pack is an absolutely vital document. It is your blueprint for developing your garment. There is no replacement for it, and it includes every single thing that you need in order to produce your garment with a factory and in an industry standard process. The factory is really the main person outside of like your team or your brand who's using the tech pack, and they're using it as a guide to create your entire garment. So every single page in that tech pack they're referencing and using in order to create the garment the way that you've specified it. After the factory has taken your tech pack, used it to produce your goods, then the tech pack also acts as a standard for which quality control compares the garment to over the lifespan of that garment. And that allows them to really compare the quality and measure it against what you actually asked for and make sure that that quality, those standards, the things that you requested are being maintained even if you're developing the same garment over many, many years. Your tech pack really becomes sort of the Bible for that garment, especially if you have something that's living in your line for many, many years and longer than just a single season. It really becomes the master copy that you can refer back to. And beyond that, if you have a style, let's say you have an awesome t-shirt that you love and you just change it a little bit every single season, you want to have that tech pack that's your master copy to always refer back to so that the size, the fitting, the silhouette, everything is still the same. So if you're questioning if you should have a spec sheet or a tech pack, the answer is always going to be yes, you absolutely need a tech pack, and a spec sheet is optional. Like I said, I have never seen a spec sheet actually used in like an industry situation, but I do think there is a place for it, especially as a smaller or new brand. If you want to get started talking to partners and talking to collaborators to kind of get a jump start while you're working on all of the like nitty gritty details in the background. So for a new brand, it could be a really good idea. If it was me personally, I would just spend that time making a tech pack and putting all of my energy into creating that tech pack and making it the best that it can be. And I wouldn't distract myself with creating a whole nother document that is just taking time and energy away from me creating the best tech pack that I can. So let's go through a really quick comparison of a spec sheet versus a tech pack. As you can see on this chart, the main thing is that a tech pack takes a longer amount of time while a spec sheet is a much quicker option. The spec sheet is not as detailed. It does not have all of the information that you need in order to develop your garment. However, it does have some of the main information so that you can get costing and sourcing started, whereas the tech pack has absolutely everything that you need and will give you very specific information on how much things are going to cost, how much fabric yardage you need, and how long it's going to take. And finally, what I would say is the most important piece is that a spec sheet is very confusing to look at and can be super overwhelming, whereas a tech pack, everything's separated onto different pages, so you can be really specific about the information that you put on it, and you can only send the information that you need or that the person you're sharing with it needs in that moment versus having to send the entire tech pack. And it's just obviously organized a lot better because there's a lot more room. Let me know below if you decide to use a spec sheet or if you're just going to go straight into developing your tech pack. If you have any stories about how you've used a spec sheet in the development process, I'd love to hear them. And if you want to learn more about tech packs, check out this video right here.